I thank Ricardo for allowing me to do this. When I got on the cruise, I didn't even know this was possible. And I talked with him after the photo show, and he agreed to do this. So I want to thank him. And if you enjoy the time that you have with me, if it's educational, helpful, enlightening, if you learn something, if you appreciate it, if it's of value to you, then thank Ricardo, please. I'm going to talk about, I'm a debut author. That means this is my first publication. It's a memoir about my life from early on. It's early memories, maybe 4 or 5 years old, till I was about 18. But I have other things I'm writing. So I want to tell you about this book, but also want to look at the bigger picture. And as an author nowadays, such is the case, there is a lot of competition amongst writers, but there's a lot of competition amongst anything in life now. So many books have been published and are available. I saw on Google about 9 months ago that they estimated there was over 129 million books in print at that point. That's all the books available from history until now in print of all languages. And then also, I saw another figure from UNESCO, and they track how many books are published every year around the world. So of all languages, I think it was 2011. They estimated there was 3 million books printed in that year alone. And since that time, rumor scuttle has it that many people have written books because of the COVID lockdown. So now I would imagine the numbers of books available are well over 135, maybe 150 million books. So as a reader, there's a lot for you to sort through to find the books that would speak to you. And as a writer, an author, it's up to me to say, here I am, look at me, read my book. I'd like to be pleased. There's a lot of competition. Excuse me. So what I want to do today is talk about the book a little bit to answer questions: how, where, why, how, who. Then read an excerpt, and then give you an opportunity to ask some questions. As I mentioned, this is about a memoir of my early years. I grew up with a father who drank alcohol. Spent his money, paycheck, on drinking. My mother argued with him about it. They fought physically. He abused her. I witnessed it as a child, of course. We visited my grandparents, who lived in Kentucky, who had a farm. My mother's parents, who had a farm about 60 miles away. We would visit fairly often, maybe once a month, sometimes twice, and on the holidays, Easter, Christmas, and so on. So I grew up around extended family on the farm, and I found solace and respite there from the troubles at my home, because my dad did not drink when we visited, and he did not argue with my mother when we visited. So that was my harmony and peace away from the struggle at home. And when I say at home, I mean my nuclear family, my father, my mother, my brother, and myself. And when I say family or farm, I mean my extended family, my grandmother, my grandfather, mostly later on the youngest uncle. But on holidays, there were many other family members there, and cousins and so on. So, I spent about 10 years writing this. I would write something, set it aside, come back to it, revise it, add something, subtract something, revise it, add something else, and revise it. So over the years, it continued to evolve. Until about 2 years ago, I decided, okay, it's good enough. I have an editor look at it. Editor looked at it and said, amongst some minor changes, 2 major things. Here's what I want you to do. I suggest. 1, write from your heart. Write about the intense things. Write about your emotional pain. To make it a compelling, strong narrative. And 2, alternate the chapters between home and farm. much like the keys on a piano, ebony, ivory. The two differences being contrasting accentuate the other. So think of Greek theater with the two masks, tragedy and comedy. Not the comedy of ha-ha, funny, but the comedy of joy of life, romance, love, and so on. And the tragedy of life, conflict, anger, pestilence, and so on. So alternate the chapters, tragedy, comedy, comedy. Although, as we all know in life, such as a symbol of the Tao, things in one is the seed of the other. They interact and they weave together. So in some chapters, of say tragedy, it's tragedy, some comedy, tragedy. And in the other chapters of comedy, there's some comedy, tragedy, comedy. So it mixes together and weaves together, much like the tide that ebbs and flows at the beach, as well as the individual waves coming in during the tides that wash and ebb and flow. That creates an ebb and flow of the story. So I did both of those things. And so now I have the memoir encompasses the struggles at home and the joy, the camaraderie, the family, the role modeling that I received on the farm, and as well as the farm life and the rhythms of farm life. Let's see. What I'd like to do now is read part of the back cover to you, which is somewhat of a summary of the book. And then I'll endeavor to read you an excerpt. In the 1950s and 60s, America placed faith in the idea of progress. However, the aftermath of World War II, with its echoes of trauma, played out in many families behind closed doors, including the Hogans. That again is my mother, my father, my brother, myself. Connard seeks harmony and escape from his parents' marital conflict over his father's binge drinking and physical abuse of his mother. He finds respite during visits to his maternal grandparents' Kentucky subsistence farm, where life appears peaceful. There he experiences unconditional love from extended family members and the exuberance of large family gatherings, and gains appreciation for nature and the rhythms of the seasons. Over time, however, Connard is forced to grapple with his role in killing both domestic and wild animals. In addition, family tragedies leave him no choice but to face issues of death and personal loss. Connard shines a light on the struggle of those living with trauma and encourages appreciation of the healing powers of unconditional love. All right. Now, as I said earlier, because I didn't know I would be doing this today, once Ricardo agreed or allowed me to do this, I began to think, what should I read as an excerpt? And I toyed with that idea. But I think I've come across one scene that, regardless of your upbringing, you could probably relate to. 2 minutes. Okay. I'm on time. So imagine, this is one of the chapters of comedy. Visiting the farm, I've accompanied my uncle, Uncle James, to a local store to sell a can of cow's cream. Remember the cans, perhaps several feet high and about that big. And he had a big top. So we would occasionally take cream or eggs or some such to the store in exchange for some money so they could use that for other things. But it was a subsistence farm. They weren't an agricultural farm. Mainly their income was from tobacco. So we're in the store. I'm accompanied and I'm helping my uncle sell the cream. I'll start here. Uncle James held open the screen door and I shuffled my way over the doorstep while I wrestled my part of the weight, that is, of the can. The place smelled of burned coal, bare wood, tobacco smoke, and dirt. Not anything like the well-lit stores with mopped linoleum floors where Mom shopped at home. Inside, the can sat next to the counter. Uncle James told the store clerk behind the cash register, "We have some cream to sell." A potbelly stove claimed the right side of the large room along with a group of empty wooden chairs. Ceiling fans turned. The wood floors showed wear and smears of mud. "How much you got?" the clerk said. Canned goods along with bags of white flour lined wooden shelves taller than me. 5 gallons, Uncle James said. Jars of sorghum occupied a section of shelf. "I'll put that on your credit balance." A revolving stand at the end of one aisle displayed a variety of burpee flour and vegetable seeds. "Okay," Uncle James said. At the back of the store, a U.S. Post Office sign hung on the wall of a little room. "You ready? Let's go," Uncle James said. "Yeah." I turned to leave. The clerk lifted the can and started towards the rear of the store. "Let me show you something," Uncle James said. I followed him across the street to a spot to the railroad tracks, next to the railroad tracks. "See that stand?" Uncle James pointed to a tall, silver-painted metal frame between the store and the tracks. "That's where they hang the mailbag for the train pickup. Want to watch?" "Yeah." I couldn't say no to that. It sounded more exciting than selling cream. I pictured a train that would slow or even stop, and a mailman with a dark brown cap would lean out and grab the bag with one hand. A uniformed mailman looked important to me, like a policeman or a fireman. "Do they have to stop?" I said. Uncle James grinned. "No, they don't need to do that." The storekeeper brought a big canvas bag from the store and hung it on the stand. The train should be coming soon now. The train should be coming soon, Uncle James said. We didn't wait long before a train appeared from around the sweeping bend to the north, coming from Louisville. Even at that age, I had a good sense of direction. "Here it comes," I said. A rumble grew. The train whistled with a long blast. The crossing bells clanged and the crossing lights flashed. The wooden arm barriers dropped across the road. Everything warned cars and people to stay off the tracks. My heart raced. A few feet to the right, and I'd be directly in front of that thing. Jump the track and run over me? As a boy, I understood bad things happened. I heard about bad things on TV news all the time. Police arrested criminals, cars crashed into one another. Buildings burned, sick people filled hospitals, and dead people filled graveyards. The train didn't seem to slow at all. The engineer, wearing a gray cap with right arm propped and head tilted out the window, pulled the cord, and the train whistled again. I couldn't tell if he looked at me or not. "It's big," I said, my words drowned out by the noise. How could anybody not know that thing was coming? "Run, don't run." It didn't feel much different than when mean drunk Dad, big, powerful, and noisy, came after Mom. But with Uncle James beside me, I stood my ground. Come hell or high water, as long as he didn't move. The ground shook. The engine worked hard, belched black smoke, its heavy weight on the tracks. Metal against metal. Loudest thing I'd ever heard. The train cleared the crossing. Whoosh! My hair whipped about. My shirt and pants flapped. A hook extended from one train car somewhere in the middle of the long line and snatched the mail bag from the stand. I followed the bag, saw someone pull it into the train as it passed by. Then I looked back toward the metal stand. Empty. The caboose rushed by. The rumble stopped, the wind calmed, the crossing bells went silent, and the gates lifted. The air smelled of diesel fumes, and the red light on the rear of the caboose grew smaller as the train sped away, mailbag rushing south towards Nashville. Thank you. There's a number, well, as a memoir and a creation of mine, all of it, this is like a baby to me, a creation of mine. So there's a lot of passages, a lot of paragraphs and areas in the book that they're quite intense for me. And so that was only one of my favorite. Amongst other things, potentially you become some of my readership, amongst others, I hope. Not only to read this book, but read the other books, but I also have a website and I blog on the website. Amongst other things, I blog about the wisdom of the 12 steps. Some of you heard me talk about that. I blog about my hiking on the Pacific Crest Trail. I blog about my travels. I blogged about my travels with my wife Janet around Iceland. I will be blogging about this trip at some point. So there's a number of things I've written, a few things, minor things I've had published. But this is my first big publication, and after that I hope to have a second memoir, perhaps a third memoir. Memoir is a slice of life, not an autobiography, but only a piece. So I'm hoping to have several pieces of my life in memoir form published. And you can help me by being a reader, by being a fan of what I write. And there are several ways to do that. I have a quarterly newsletter that I send. No obligation to you to even read it. Of course, it's free. All you need to do is give me your name and your email. I'll put you on the list, and you can follow what my writing journey, my travel journey, my blog journey, and so forth on the quarterly newsletter. I have information here about my website, about my email address, and you can Google my name and Google the book title, and I've done that, and I am surprised at just how much information about me is now on the internet about the book. I Googled the book title a few weeks ago, and I was surprised to learn that aside from Amazon, which was originally available, it's now available through BarnesandNoble.com and even other booksellers. So you'd be amazed at how much information. Once you begin to put information and it gets somehow connected to the internet, it lives there forever. How much information will accumulate about you. So anyway, I want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. If we must stop before you ask a question or I get you an answer, I'm happy to chat with you later over a cup of coffee or drink or whatever, and also email communication. Question, Andy.
What year was the mail and train?
Oh, I didn't give you the title of that chapter.
So let us know. Does that sound like a steam engine that you're describing?
It was. The chapter was entitled Ornate Bedroom, so I'm talking about some other things. This was like a trip during that visit. This was New Year, 1957.
Toward the end of the steam era.
Likely, yes, yeah. And then they started having the big diesels, and those were belts too, but not quite the same. You didn't see the workings on the sides of the wheels and the pistons. Anyone else? Well, we have a flotilla of yakkers over there. Okay, well, again, I appreciate your coming and spending your time with me this morning, and if you enjoyed this or whatever, feel free to let Ricardo know. I'm really appreciative. I was touched by his willingness to trust that I would do this some favor and create value to you.
So if you want to buy a book, what point is to the right direction to buy your book?
Well, as I say, there's a number of avenues you can do that. You can Google the book title and go to Amazon and my Amazon book page, and you can get it there by Kindle or hard copy print. They will ship it to you. You could get it hard copy print through Barnes and Noble, and there's probably several others now that I'm not even aware of.
Books a Million. That's a good one too.
I'm sorry?
Books a Million.
Books a Million, that's probably there. I know it's on Smashwords. There was another bookseller, I don't recall the name of it now, but they were there as well. So it's probably like a spider web that's worked its way to other websites and available any number of ways. I also have it available at my home in Santa Barbara, but obviously I won't be able to provide that to you.
And how old were you when you've written this? I mean, the voice of the boy.
Well, I attempted to, as I wrote this, to provide the voice appropriate to my age at the time in the book. So earlier on, slightly younger, and later on, slightly older. And as I matured and grew older, the voice should change a little. I don't know how successful I am in that.
So, but what age was it?
Well, I started, I think the first chapter might have been 5 or 6. And then toward the end, more of 18, 19, I had graduated high school and began to then emancipate myself from home, from my family, my mother and father. Okay? Good questions. And so again, anything else, let me know. I'd be happy to chat with you. Thanks for coming. Oh, I will say one other. Did you have a question? Okay, I will say one other thing. I got this from a friend who was my mentor when I was getting internship hours before I became a marriage and family therapist, which had a license and worked in that field for 25 years before I retired. I really respected him and appreciated his presence. And since he has since passed away, but he's always used a salutation, walk in beauty. So I want to leave you with that today and explain to you that that comes from American Indian phrase, may you walk in beauty. And it means, may you be at peace and harmony with the world around you. And you can Google that and learn more about that, but I really appreciate it. So I would end it with say, walk in beauty.
All right. Thank you.